Hello and welcome to PSG Review. It's a new time, a new campaign is upon us, and finally the Euros and Copa America from this summer have entered the archives of history, even if very recent history. The players are arriving at the training center bit by bit, while the ones in charge are looking for deals, both arrivals and departures.
You are listening to PSG Review. Here's your host, Mikko.
I can't stress this enough. It's so good to be back here with you right now. We have so much stuff to go through. It's been a while. I know there's not been too much in terms of PSG. The rumors have been, and I won't lie, even when I record right now, quite tentative. Nothing seems to set in stone, so there's no need to zoom into all of these rumors and gossip too much. We will have a quick run through today, but not that much. It's not like last summer at all, but then again, last summer was very exceptional, so we can't really expect a repeat of something similar. The continental tournaments have been played. Only one PSG player lifted the trophy, that is Fabian Ruiz, who had a brilliant tournament. And fun fact, he has never yet lost a match of football with the Spanish national team, and that is quite something, a very deserved victory for Spain in the Euros this summer. By the way, last time there were Euros and Copa America, we had Marco Verratti and Gianluigi Donnarumma who won the Euros, although Donnarumma's deal was only announced after the Euros and he then joined us as a champion of Europe. And the other side of the Atlantic in the Copa America trophy was lifted by Angel Di Maria, Leandro Paredes and Lionel Messi, who joined PSG also after the tournament itself. So now having only one player on either one of these competitions is of course not a lot, but let's have a quick run through and we start with the Euros. All in all, pretty solid tournament for many PSG players. In particular, we have to highlight Fabian Ruiz, who of course I have already mentioned. He was absolutely key player for Spain, the European champion. To be quite frank, it's clear to me that Rodri is one of the best in the world and his profile is such that you don't find those players loitering around in every corner, so I don't begrudge his Player of the Tournament award, but Fabian Ruiz was up there also. He was in the mix, he really was, and I don't know if anyone would have protested too much if he got the gong. Certainly not me. He had absolutely brilliant tournament, and more about him in a bit. Vitinha as well as Nuno Mendes were starters and very important players for Portugal, was having a decent tournament, while Danilo and Gonzalo Ramos didn't really feature very much at all. They played in one match and for Ramos it was really only 24 minutes. Portugal, to their detriment, were stubbornly keeping their celebrity forward there in attack despite no goals, so Ramos found himself yet again in a shadow of yet another unbenchable player. It sounds familiar. He is a specialist in that. I hate to say that, a not too dissimilar situation with Barcola and France. Not entirely the same situation, but something similar. There certainly were some similarities there. Towards the end of the tournament, he got some minutes and he was one of the top players for those moments, those few moments of the very forgettable Euros as far as Les Bleus go, while Randal Colomwani was the most effective forward for France with a goal and one shot that was marked as an own goal, but it was his goal otherwise, so to speak. It was his shot that then was deflected into the goal. So it's one of those that I think it's quite harsh to give them as own goals, and also you have to be there to make that, to do that action in order for the ball to be able to go there. So if somebody, while trying to stop it, accidentally puts it in the own goal, it seems a bit harsh to me. I mean, this was certainly one of those. Dembele was Dembele, more or less like he is for us, up and down, sometimes very good, and sometimes, the final product is somewhat lacking. Warren Zaire-Emery sat on the bench the entire tournament. It is what it is. It's a particularly bitter pill, especially since the alternative would have been to play probably every match in the hometown Summer Olympics, which is not, of course, the main thing in a football calendar, but for a professional athlete, of course, Olympics are still Olympics, even if they wouldn't mean quite as much as in some of the other disciplines. But this is life, and as much as it is a raw deal, it also makes sense from all angles. This is not anything, crazy. This is quite logical thing, because France midfield has many options, and the team didn't have one easy match in this tournament where they could have rotated more freely. Warren Emery himself could have never said no to his first major international tournament, to be selected into that. It was far too big thing for him to say no to, even if it was always a chance that he doesn't get that many minutes. And for Paris, for PSG, I think it would have been foolish to let him to the Olympics as well, because these young players, they too need to rest, whatever they themselves might think about it. So I hope that when young Warren returns to the training center, when the time comes, we will have older players, or even Luis Enrique himself putting an arm around him and providing some words of wisdom. Of course, Sir Emery might not even need them. He's mature beyond his years by the look of things, but he must pace himself in every which way, because the bright future is there waiting for him. But, you can't really rush there either. It will come. Things will happen when they can, and he will have many, many tournaments left to play. Of course, they will not be home Olympics, that's for sure, but that is one of those unfortunate things that happen sometimes in life. We shall see how much this impacts the future of Didier Deschamps, but of course the French strategy has been all along quite similar for some time already, certainly, not too different from this. There's a certain reliance on the quality of the players and that they deliver. Their defense is really so strong, and all around for every position there is pretty much a world-class player. It's an impressive team, but the strategy at this point just wasn't quite enough, and there were other teams that could make the difference, and also a lot of the French players just couldn't. It was very difficult for them to score goals, and our former player and the French captain, number 10, Kylian Mbappe, was of course perhaps in the middle of that controversy, somewhat unlucky for him also because of the nose injury that he had. I have no reason to excuse any of his behavior or any of his level or anything like that. He's no longer a player. It is what it is. But I think it's safe to say that while every other excuse I think was fairly laughable, it clearly impacted his play, the nose situation, and the fact that he didn't seem comfortable at all with the mask. But it's something that happens to players, and you kind of have to play with that also. And if you want to be known as the best player in the world, well, then, the expectations are what they are. All that being said, this was a fairly poor tournament for France. I don't think there's a way around it. And of course, there's a chance that Didier Deschamps will continue with the French team. Who knows? If they said that, hold on, it's time for Zidane, then I'm sure that no one would set the tires on fire either. Other PSG players were Milan Skriniar, Slovakia, did I think pretty well for what was the expectation, and Donnarumma did what he could for Italy. That didn't feel like a complete team at any point. Their attack was non-existent really, and I would say that their lack of success was hardly Donnarumma's fault. I think if anything, it has to be said that Donnarumma made a lot of great saves, and the numbers in some of the matches could have been quite different without him. All in all, I don't know if these were the most exciting Euros ever. I would say that Spain was by far the most fun to watch, and therefore it's easy to say that they deserved the success that they had. And I have a feeling that Spain is the team to beat for the next few years in both men and women's football. I mentioned that Fabian Ruiz, he could have also been the player of the tournament, and that is great, of course, for us because he's our player. But just as a football fan, unrelated to PSG, the most fun player to watch in this tournament for me, it was Nico Williams of Spain. Of course, there was a lot of talk about Lamine Yamal, who stole the headlines, and obviously not without any merit, because what a player he is, and undoubtedly he has a great future. But for me, Nico Williams was really great, and there was some similarity there with our Bradley Barcola and himself, and not just because they play the same position, but when either one of those players get the ball, they have their eyes on attack and forward movement. Some great triples for sure, the great speed also, but there's this will that not everyone has, sort of lack of fear, something like that, and I do enjoy that tremendously. I already mentioned the name Kylian Mbappe, our former player, and I promise to keep this next thought very brief. Because for 7 years now, I have seen every single last one of the matches that Kylian Mbappe has played, whether for a club, our club, PSG, or for country, France. And the semi-final match against Spain was the last in that line. From here on in, I will mainly see him for his national team shirt and occasionally otherwise, and not because of him necessarily, but because of other reasons. I may watch those matches because I don't really watch La Liga like that anyways. And I will have to say that I'm happy to have ended this era. I don't feel bitter. It's been era of great moments and a lot of positivity, but I'm not sad that it's come to an end. I think we are all quite ready for it to have reached this point, because his Euros were incredibly forgettable. That's not a controversial thing to say, but so has been his entire last half a season. More excuses than moments of magic. I thought that it was a PSG thing initially, but it wasn't any better for the national team either. I'm not saying that he was catastrophic for either, but you don't buy Ferrari to drive 20 miles an hour. It's a waste of resources and money. Looking at France and Portugal in these Euros, it is remarkable to see the situation like this, that great teams with great players compromise their fluidity just because there are these unbenchable players on the pitch, whether they are in form or going through a difficult patch, just because there's a chance. There's, even if a very small chance, but there's a chance that they will do something miraculous. And for that strategy alone, since neither one of those players that I'm talking about managed to do very much in this tournament, both countries, I suppose, deserved to be knocked out. It was a choice of strategy that didn't pay out. And of course, in both cases, there were other reasons as well. I'm not trying to suggest that it was as simple as that, or that in a team sport it was about individual single players. But I think that those choices by the coaches of respective national teams, they were a major factor in their relative demise. And the same could be said about England also and Harry Kane, but at least there were a few more chances for his backups. I think that England was suffering a little bit from this, but not necessarily to the same extent as France and Portugal. And one example of that, of course, is that England made it to the final, and unlike those other teams mentioned. And it might sound trivial, but I kind of feel like we're talking about the future of football here, the soul of the game, if it's not too pompous thing to say. I hope that these Euros were underlining that most important aspect of this beautiful game. It's a beautiful game, and the most important aspect is that it is a team sport. A team sport, and just because these individuals are great, and just because these individuals are great marketing tools, we all know that it's the teams that win, and in that I really think that the best team won. I mean, when you talk about individual quality and individual talent and names, and they will sell all these shirts and all that, as PSG fans, we know a thing or two about that, of course, maybe more than most teams on their supporters, but it's a team sport, and that's why I'm relatively excited about our new project and the changes that has happened, because I think that we are becoming more and more and more a team. I'm not a huge Spain supporter. I don't really have a horse in that race. I don't have a strong opinions for or against Spain, but watching the whole tournament, they played the best football, and probably their knockout match against Germany was really the best match of the tournament. Perhaps I think it certainly, in my opinion, had the two of the best teams playing against each other. If my own national team, which is Finland, doesn't make it into these tournaments, which they generally don't, they did once during the Corona years, but if they don't, I tend to support France because, well, I like France, but it also often has the most PSG connection, not just because of the current or even past players, but also because of the many Parisian titis like Mike Maignan, Kingsley Coman, Alphonse Areola, and the time heals in such a way that I will even mention the name of Adrien Rabiot. But this time France had an impulse, and they didn't leave much to reminisce about. It was not 2010, but it was no 2018 either. Copa America, well, I must say that I didn't follow it very much. Marquinhos and Beraldo played for Brazil. Not an amazing display by the giant of football. They are not in their best era, although that's not the fault of our players. And Manuel Ugarte with Uruguay, well, that was much better, but will he be playing for PSG much longer? We will talk about that in a moment. Congratulations to PSG club legend Angel Di Maria for Copa America victory as he brings his illustrious national team career to close. One of my favorite players, and someone who often sort of gets a little bit overlooked because there's always been someone more famous next to him. But good on you, Angel Di Maria. All accolades are deserved. That's that about that. Let's talk about PSG as it is now. It's not entirely common that at midpoint of July the preseason is quite unclear. But here's what we know. The players who have been in international tournaments will get 3 weeks off from whichever point their football ended. As I record this on Monday, that means that for Fabian Ruiz, the football ended last night on Sunday, and Ugarte was playing until very recently as well, but everyone has their own hourglass with this. The Olympics are still to play for, and Ashraf Hakimi will be there for Morocco, so he will join us later down the line. And some of the players who haven't been involved are back since today, as I'm recording this on Monday. The lone players like Ilyas Husni, Noah Lemina, Ismail Garbi, Ayman Kari, Luis Mogué, Colin Dagba, and Renato Sanchez. Then we have players like Kang In Lee and Marco Asensio, Safonov and Gabriel Musardo, as well as academy players like Yoram Sak, Jean Kadou and Ibrahim Baye, who are all part of the first team preseason, as is Seni Mayulu, of course, but he's heading to Turkey to play for France in the under-19s Euros, so best of luck to him. The annual preseason tour as well as Trophée des Champions have been cancelled for this year. Well, Trophée des Champions is delayed rather than cancelled, to be quite precise. It was supposed to be in China together with the PSG's preseason tour that was also going to happen there in Asia. But now I think that the time and place is open again for Trophée des Champions, and like I said, the preseason tour is not happening as it's looking like now. Certainly not in any kind of extended ways. There's going to be few friendly matches, but I think they might be in Europe. Whenever and wherever Trophée des Champions is played, it is PSG against AS Monaco, who were the Ligue 1 runners-up. Last season, as PSG won both Ligue and Coupe de France. So there's going to be more information when it's going to be known when it's going to happen. Everything is a little bit up in the air at the moment. Also, what we do know is that PSG will play a friendly match against Leipzig on 10th of August. It had been agreed years ago, but now it's actually happening. And there should be other preseason matches as well, possibly in Austria. And I'm sure that at the moment, very unclear itinerary of preseason will become clearer with time. There have been some rumors, some are more advanced than others, about the potential departures from PSG. Manuel Ugarte seems to be on his way out from Paris after only one season. Nothing has been confirmed so far, but some of the rumors do seem fairly advanced. His start with PSG was really strong. I remember we were all very excited about him because we hadn't really had a proper six in many seasons, and it was very exciting to have him, but he did run out of that momentum at some point during the autumn. His football isn't 100% compatible, of course, with Luis Enrique's style, that is for sure. He is relentless pressure provider at the bottom of the midfield, but with the ball, he's no magician. I think it's a bit melancholic to say bye to him so soon, if indeed he is leaving, of course, if the rumors are true. But of course, there's a context for it, and that will be what the incoming players are like, what kind of profiles might be joining us during this summer. And of course, we will also have Gabriel Musardo, who is joining us already. I feel like Manuel Ugarte would have deserved another season, but the insiders will know the reasons better, of course. They're the ones who have to make the choices and stand by them. The good news is that there could be a transfer fee incoming. If he's leaving, Manchester United could be the destinations for the Uruguay international defensive midfielder Ugarte. The final word will be coming in when it will. If it will, things might step up a gear now that the Copa America is finished as well. Fabian Ruiz, he had a very strong Euro tournament in Germany. I have mentioned that many times already, but it deserves to be repeated. He has been key part of the Spain team, which in turn was the best team in the whole tournament. Basically, in a right system, Ruiz is a decent player. Amazing even, to be precise, especially when the system supports him and he has right players around him. I mean, I don't say that based on his PSG seasons, but what he did with Spain was just brilliant. We have seen him perform very well for PSG at times, but we have also seen his limitations, and if somebody wants to pay good money to get his services, I would say that PSG could consider cashing in, because Fabian Ruiz isn't getting any younger, so getting a good fee for him now might be one of the last chances for that to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that we should sell him, definitely. That's not what I'm saying. Not the day after the final at the end of a phenomenal tournament by him. And while he's not young, he could still have several good seasons ahead of him. But depending on the future plans and arrangements for new players, there might never be a better time to cash in on him than right now. We either carpet the DM or not. I don't have a strong personal opinion about it one way or another, but either way it could work very well, and either way it could also backfire. If somebody wants to break the bank, as the cliche goes, then sure enough. But usually if somebody wants to break the bank, it is us. So we will see if there's going to be any offers for Fabian Ruiz. And like I said, certainly we should not sell him on a cheap. If there's a very good offer, then that's something to consider. There's also word on the streets that Saudi team Al Ittihad would be after our captain Marquinhos. It's difficult to speculate on that too much, but like I said last year, I will say this year again, if any of our players are even thinking about going to the Saudi League, then they probably should go there, because that isn't the level of ambition we can be happy with. We need players who want to win everything, including the Champions League, not players who want to switch the level down and money up. Some suggest that Marquinhos isn't entirely against the opportunity, but then I think that it was reported by Ligue, so their track record is far from perfectly accurate. It could go either way. Right now, there's not enough concrete info to feel anything too much about it one way or another, and that of course can change at any time. If he was to leave PSG, there would be need, of course, to replace him as a defender, but also we would be losing a lot of leadership. Now, of course, it depends who you ask, how great his leadership skills are. Sometimes good, sometimes not as good. But with both Kimpembe and Lucas Hernandez, and even if he's only been there for a year, but I've been very impressed with his ability to sort of like stand up and show lead by example. But also he's one of those players that he can lead. I think he can provide some well-needed leadership, and of course he's a very experienced player, even if very little of that experience is in Paris. But both of those guys, Kimpembe and Hernandez, their returns are very uncertain. Then we have Danilo, probably not that many minutes if he's going to stay in Paris. Maybe there's not going to be that many minutes for him, not that kind of constant minutes that he could be, for instance, our captain. Now Kylian Mbappe is gone. So there's no other choices for the armband that would be entirely obvious. It would perhaps be somebody like Donnarumma. He would probably be a good example because, of course, he's been playing on a top level for a very long time. He's also captain for Italy, and let's face it, he will probably play most of the matches unless something quite unusual happens that I'm not expecting. So it could be that in case of Marquinhos leaving. That's, of course, there's a big if. But leadership, of course, is not just about armband. That's, of course, true. We need experience too and a right type of mentality. So that's something to consider when we are making our squad a little bit younger, perhaps, and with the players and profiles that have been leaving in the last couple of years. It might be important to keep that in mind, and of course, I'm sure that they are keeping that in mind. Other potential departures, well, there's a report that Milan Skriniar would have landed on the list of undesirables from here on in. We will see if there will be offers or interest from anywhere. Another player with a lot of potential and quality, but the style that doesn't really mix well with our current strategies. And even if he has only been playing in Paris for one season, his deal, of course, was done well before Luis Enrique joined us. So there was just a little bit of a mismatch there. Other outgoings or potential ones, any rumors around these, very much based on who will be available and for what price coming in. Of course, there needs to be balance in that. Joshua Kimmich, he was talked about as a potential target for PSG from Bayern Munich and German national team. Of course, now the German newspaper Bild is said that he isn't interested in us. Now, this happens and no one is surprised at all, just like Lenny Yoro doesn't seem to be too keen on us or continuing in France. Xavi Simons doesn't seem to want to play in France and for PSG. And I think this is a kind of a long-term challenge for both Paris but also for Ligue 1. Desiree Doué is another young super talent, and he seems to be ready to leave Stade Rennes, and PSG is interested, but once more we will find out what kind of pull we have, or is there a push away from Ligue 1? Is that too much? Argentinian Manchester City forward Julian Alvarez is a name mentioned. Apparently, we are back also pursuing Victor Osimhen also, but I don't see those as our priorities. We will see how all of that will unfold. They're just sort of big names, and oftentimes when it comes to that, it also happens that whichever team they will go in the end, it's usually pushing the price up when you just say the magical words, PSG is interested. The big catch would be Portuguese midfielder João Neves, a very talented player from Benfica, and reportedly PSG is willing to offer a significant fee for him, but tens of millions below the asking price, which is his release clause. 120 million euros is a lot. There are other names too, but in real terms it's tough to deep dive too much in such a speculative waters. I trust that we're about to up a gear now that the big tournaments are done, but we just have to wait and see. PSG women's team have been on a positive trajectory for the last season, so I was particularly interested and admittedly also quite nervous about how this build-up should continue this summer. Now let's get the worst thing out of the way first. Tabitha Chawinga joined the legion of players who jumped the ship to our rivals in Lyon. It's a story as old as women's football in France, I'm afraid, and from here on in I have nothing more to say about her because she chose not to be our player, but I will give you this. It really took quite a bit away from that sting when Gretchen Bock joined us from their side. She's a world-class defender and undoubtedly a great signing. Very happy about that. I feel like the defense needed that one player to bring that strength and leadership, so that's really great. There are other departures as well. Sandy Baltimore, she went to Chelsea. I've always been a fan of her through the better and worse times, but I also understand why she wants to try something else, and I appreciate that she did not go to Lyon. I think that is really kind of the main thing, that if she has to go, if you have to go to Barcelona, what do I care? Go anywhere you want, but just don't go to Lyon. Look, this Lyon thing, there's such a disconnect there because it hurts us fans a lot, but the players, they don't seem to care about it one bit, like not at all. It seems to be such an afterthought to them year after year. And because it doesn't bother them, so we will always struggle with that. It's something that will probably happen. And hopefully it will happen more also to our direction, because these are just the two French clubs that are kind of in a league of their own. Although, you know, there's a good solid teams behind us also, but and one could say that Lyon is even a step ahead of us, but we are there on the top, even in the top of the Europe, they are a little bit higher, but nevertheless two competitive teams. And I'm hoping that since what they've been doing, that every summer for the many years now, their main signing of the summer comes from Paris again this year with Tabitha Chawinga. I hope that we can also start getting our own back. Like, I'm very glad that we have players like Sakina Karshuai or Gretchen Bock now who have joined us from their colors. These players, you know, Bock and Karshuai, they obviously have better judgment and more class, but this thing, it won't go away. It's a dynamic that is here to stay, no matter how much it might upset me. Maybe the answer to that is this: we just need to get our own back. Besides Baltimore, also Oriane Jean-François has notified that she's out of the club after a long injury. I liked her a lot also. Good sort of defensive midfielder. No fireworks, but a fairly solid basic standard. And she was bringing a lot of stability into our defensive play and also possession play. A very calm player. But she's out of the team now, as is Amalie Vangscourt, from Denmark, and Swiss Viola Galligares. They've gone both to Juventus as a part of a deal where we got the young Nigerian forward Jennifer Oninye Exachini. Very pleased with that and look forward to seeing her in action. Another forward that we got is Dutch Romee Lechter, as is joining us from Ajax Amsterdam. Some other peripheral characters have been moving also, but let's focus on our new goalkeeper for a second. The biggest name of them all. Mary Earps is a European champion with England, and 2023, that's last year, she was awarded by BBC as the Sports Personality of the Year. That is quite a significant achievement. Britain, of course, has athletes in all sorts of disciplines, from Lewis Hamilton to Harry Kane and such. You know, cricket, rugby, and all these things are big there also. So for Mary Earps to beat everyone in that, it tells you a lot about her, and of course also about the high status that women's football has in England especially, but also elsewhere in Britain. And I insist on saying that it's not the best level, which is often proved in the Champions League that they have for women's football in England, but it is popular there. It is very popular, and as a product, it's more attractive than in France, the top level football on women's side. And it has carved its own audience and fan base. Of course, there's always going to be some overlapping between the fans of men's game and women's game, like I'm a fan of both, but there are also many new fans who perhaps find the stadiums a little bit easier to approach during the women's football than during the men's football. There's been a lot of anecdotes about that. I don't think it's controversial to say that France has a massive way to go to get that level of popularity for women's football, even if the level of it in footballing terms would be higher than, say, in England or in actual fact in most countries, because many countries have got like a one club that is competing, but France actually has two. And then, Paris FC did very well last year. Fleury knocked out, for instance, Lyon from Coupe de France last season. And there are other teams that have been raised by just playing against these top teams year after year. There's just been like what France has on its side is time. There's just been more time for quality to go up and develop. And that's something that you can't just sort of like buy in overnight or in one transfer window. These things, they take quite a lot more time. But none of this is to say anything bad about Mary Earps. We have never had a player of this level of fame in Paris in the women's team. And we have had amazing players, and even now we still have some people like Ligue Martens. As much as her time in Paris has been massive disappointment, really, but and she might be on her way out. We don't quite yet know as I'm recording, but she was some years ago the best in the world. She really was, but because England has its way quite forcefully with an element of arrogance injecting itself above anybody else in football, which is helped by the fact that we all speak English, so they are in a position to tell us just how great they are or how great they think they are. They're existing on another level of notoriety there and fame when it comes to these things. And by the way, as a former resident of UK, I say this with a certain amount of love. Really, I do certainly experience, but also love. This is not a criticism of them or anything else, just trying to understand why these things work like this, like they do. So Mary Earps is a good goalkeeper. She's a very good goalkeeper. She absolutely is, and I'm very happy that she's in Paris. I think it's raising the level of the team, and it's very good. She isn't necessarily the best in the world. That's all I'm saying. There's a little bit more hype than quality, but there's also quality. So it's kind of like they work in tandem, and it's just that there's more hype than normally, let's say. But she's good, and undoubtedly she will help the team a lot. That is my belief, and I hope that she will help to track the optics and just the sort of like the vibe, the feeling of French women's football, or women's football in France, rather, to be more precise, to a new level. To kind of like force that interest somehow, because that kind of characters, they will attract some attention, and I hope that the structures behind the French Women's Football League will be able to utilize that and take that chance and opportunity and make something happen. We also have a new coach. Fabrice Abriel is joining us from Fleury. The thing about Fleury last season is that, for instance, they knocked Lyon out at Coupe de France, like I just mentioned a moment ago, gave us a good final as well, although PSG, of course, won the final. But with very much a low block defensive football. It's not the most exciting thing to watch, but of course he'll have a whole host of different players and entirely different caliber in his use in Paris. So we will see how he will line them up. Elisa de Almeida signed an extension, and a curious detail is also that Sakina Kashuai, who scored a banger of a goal against Sweden in the Euro qualifiers and recently she signed a long extension with us, had suggested in an interview that she's looking to play higher on the wing in the next season. Apparently this is something that he has been talking about with PSG. PSG has played a lot with back four and Kashawi as a left back there, but now with some strengthening of the back line, good they utilize back three, and Sakina would be more of a wing back, or will she move there even higher than that? Only future will know. But from that awful start that we had for the summer, well, it has taken some relatively positive steps since, and I for one am very happy about that. I feel like we owe some gratitude, and it has to be acknowledged here. One of the great unsung personalities of the last 17 years at PSG, Papus Camara. a great servant of the club, first as a player, then as an assistant coach, and finally as a youth coach. He has given us a lot, and many young promises have had him to thank for their last legs before joining the first squad. I hope that Papus Camara finds himself a solid and exciting project, and there's a chance that we will hear from him in the future in one form or another. Nothing but gratitude and love. Papus, best of luck. The preseason is now starting. Things are on the move and some of the rumors will fade. New ones will pop up and undoubtedly some of the existing ones will be concluded. Perhaps some of them, but I don't feel like dwelling on those rumors. That's not very interesting to me. And another thing that to me personally is not super interesting, I have to say, is the TV broadcast deal, which is very topical at the moment. There's a lot happening around that. There's a certain amount of politics involved here, and Lyon's John Texter, the owner, has recorded his opinion online, taking shots at Nasser Al-Khelaifi, and right now as I record, Nasser is busy, I think, preparing his version of They're Not Like Us to take Textor down a notch or two. If Ligue 1 wants to be a solid business proposal, it will need new investment, not toning down the existing one. I suppose we are on the same page with that, although what do I care if everything in football was just halved? I was just thinking about it. What if everything was just halved? The salaries of the players was halved, the ticket prices were halved, the TV deals and access to watch the matches wherever you see them, wherever you watch them. If that was just half, and the price of the shirts, which now are from sort of like 100 euros to 160 euros or whatever they are for a t-shirt full of adverts for companies you might not even agree with or want to promote. So in an alternative timeline and universe, I would be happy to see a little bit more realistic arrangements rather than this current Star Wars competition. But that's another thing and something that is unlikely to drastically change during this summer weekend 3, can't we? The TV deal is important source of income, of course, for the clubs, and the fact that in France the domestic deal isn't great for the clubs or for the consumers, that means us, the people, the fans, then it really won't help to strengthen the quality of the league, which can become a real vicious cycle spiraling out of control when clubs don't have money to spend on players. The players will leave, the promising players, the young players, and that will mean that the level of quality in Ligue 1 is going to suffer even more than it has. I mean, this is already happening quite a bit, but it can get even worse. The reason why Premier League in England is today what it is largely because of the TV money, and in their case it has a lot to do with Rupert Murdoch's investment. So Premier League success is just another thing in his pro-war media arsenal, unfortunately, but that's hardly football's fault, of course. It just is what it is. TV deals are very important for the level and quality, for the finances, which essentially kind of like go a little bit hand in hand. We are getting back into this. Find me online on Twitter, as I insist on calling it, at PSG Review Pod, and on Instagram and TikTok, the show is at PSG Review. You can also find us on Blue Sky and YouTube, and of course, all the usual podcast platforms. Rate and review. I don't really even know to what extent that helps for people to find it better. I think that the algorithms are what they are, but do listen, and thanks for doing so, and share with your friends and enemies alike if they are interested in PSG and things related to it. I kind of have this feeling that the best way for you to support this show, if you feel like doing that, is to kind of directly recommend it to somebody who might be interested. Thank you so much. It's good to be back. My name is Mikko, and until the next time, peace.